February 28, 2026. 2:17 in the morning. Somewhere over the Persian Gulf, a B-2 Spirit stealth bomber banks silently through the dark at 50,000 feet, invisible to radar, invisible to satellites, invisible to the sleeping world below. Its crew had been briefed, fueled, and launched before most of Washington had finished dinner. By the time the sun rose over Tehran, the bombs had already fallen. The United States was at war with Iran. By 9:30 that same morning, the New York Stock Exchange opened, and something happened that almost nobody on television talked about. While the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell, while airlines bled, while the travel industry quietly choked on jet fuel prices nobody could afford, 7 specific names began climbing. Not slowly, not cautiously. They climbed like they had been waiting, like somebody already knew. This is the story of who profits when America goes to war. This is the story of the 7 names you need to know. If you've never seen a story like this on your screen before, hit subscribe right now, because this channel goes to the places the evening news is too polite to visit. Subscribe, and let's begin. The first thing you need to understand is the scale of what happened in the first 100 hours of Operation Epic Fury. A think tank estimated the United States burned through $3.7 billion in weapons alone in that opening window. According to U.S. Central Command, more than 20 distinct weapon systems were deployed across air, sea, land, and missile defense forces simultaneously. Tomahawk missiles, THAAD interceptors, Patriot batteries, B-1 bombers, B-2 stealth bombers, F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning II fighters, EA-18G electronic warfare jets, MQ-9 Reaper drones, low-cost one-way attack drones called Lucas. Each of those weapons has a manufacturer. Each of those manufacturers has shareholders. And every single one of those shareholders woke up on March 2nd substantially wealthier than they had gone to sleep on February 28th. The question nobody on cable news asked out loud was devastatingly simple. Who ordered these weapons? Who built them? And who cashed in? Name number 1. Lockheed Martin. On the morning of March 2nd, 2026, Lockheed Martin stock opened up 3.4% in the first day of trading since the war began. But that single morning tells only the smallest part of the story. Since the beginning of 2026 alone, as tensions between Washington and Tehran had been visibly escalating, Lockheed stock had already climbed nearly 40%. In all of 2024, Lockheed Martin generated $68.4 billion in defense revenue. That is not $68 billion in total business. That is $68 billion from governments paying for weapons. 74 cents of every dollar Lockheed Martin earns comes directly from U.S. government defense contracts, which means it comes directly from American taxpayers. And what exactly was Lockheed selling in Iran? The THAAD Interceptor, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, is a system designed to shoot down ballistic missiles. Each THAAD interceptor costs $12.77 million. One interceptor, for one missile. In January 2026, just weeks before the war began, Lockheed Martin signed a deal with the Pentagon to quadruple THAAD production from 96 to 400 units per year. At the time, the public explanation was general readiness. In hindsight, the math writes itself. They also make the Patriot missile itself at $4 million per shot, and the F-35 Lightning II stealth fighter that flew over Iranian airspace on the opening night of the war. Lockheed Martin's stock has risen 37% since March 2023. While gas prices rose, while grocery bills rose, while American mortgage rates jumped sharply in the first days of the conflict, Lockheed shareholders were having the best quarter of their lives. Name number 2. RTX. The company formerly known as Raytheon. RTX stock rose 4.7% on the first day of trading after the Iran war began, and it didn't stop there. Over the 3-year stretch from March 2023 to March 2026, RTX posted the single largest stock gain of any major U.S. defense company, up 110%. In 2024, RTX generated $43.6 billion in defense revenue. Their primary product in the Iran conflict is the Patriot radar and ground system, the targeting brain that Lockheed's missiles plug into. The complete Patriot battery is a partnership between both companies, and in war, that partnership is extraordinarily lucrative. Here is the detail that stops the room. In one documented incident during the Iran conflict, 11 Patriot missiles were fired to intercept a single Iranian missile. 11 missiles at $4 million each to stop one incoming round. That is $44 million spent in roughly 30 seconds. And for the shareholders of RTX and Lockheed Martin, that $44 million represented pure, instantaneous revenue. Raytheon also manufactures the Tomahawk cruise missile, among the most heavily deployed weapons in the opening strikes on Iran. Between 2015 and 2025, RTX returned $57 billion to its investors through stock buybacks and dividends. Not to workers. Not to factories. Not to the American military stockpile. To shareholders. While Trump would later order the company to stop buybacks and invest in actual manufacturing capacity, by then the pattern had been running for a decade. Drop a comment below right now and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. This story is global, and I want to know who's seeing it. Name number 3. Northrop Grumman. On March 2, 2026, Northrop Grumman stock did something the other defense companies did not. It surged 6% in a single day, the largest single-day gain of any major Pentagon contractor since the war began. The reason was sitting on the runway at Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. The B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, the aircraft that crossed 50,000 feet of darkness to deliver the opening blows on Iran. Northrop Grumman builds the B-2. Each B-2 costs the American taxpayer approximately $2 billion to purchase and more than $150,000 per flight hour to operate. The fleet that struck Iranian nuclear and military facilities on the opening night of Operation Epic Fury was essentially a fleet of flying stock certificates, each one producing a return for Northrop shareholders every time it left the ground. Since March 2023, Northrop Grumman stock has risen 60%. In 2024, the company generated $37.9 billion in defense revenue. The company's CEO had publicly stated in January 2026 that a deal to accelerate production of the next-generation B-21 Raider bomber could be reached within months. That was January. The war began on February 28. The B-21 contract conversation has not slowed down since. Northrop Grumman does not just build bombers. It provides the radar technology aboard the E-3 Sentry AWACS surveillance aircraft that directed traffic in Iranian airspace during the conflict. It is the backbone of the electronic architecture of American air war, and when American air war begins, Northrop Grumman shareholders are the first people in the world to know it financially. Name number 4. Palantir Technologies. And this one is different from all the others. Palantir's stock jumped 15% in the single week following the start of the Iran war, its best weekly performance since August 2024. That alone would make it a story. But the full story of Palantir's role in the Iran conflict goes far beyond a stock ticker, and it is one of the most disturbing conflicts of interest in the entire war. Palantir builds AI data analytics systems used by the US military and intelligence agencies to process and act on battlefield information in real time. In the Iran conflict, the company was reportedly providing real-time AI targeting by integrating classified data from satellites, surveillance networks, and intelligence feeds through a system called Maven Smart System. But what investigators and journalists began uncovering in the days after the war started was something older. Palantir had, since 2015, operated a platform called Mosaic, a $50 million AI system that processed approximately 400 million data objects including satellite imagery, trade logs, metadata, and social media feeds from inside Iran on behalf of the International Atomic Energy Agency. In June 2025, Mosaic flagged an apparent surge in enriched uranium at Iranian facilities. That assessment reportedly formed the core of Israel's intelligence case against Iran. Israel struck the day after the IAEA passed a non-compliance resolution. Trump authorized strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities shortly after the war started. And who profited from the war that Palantir's own AI system helped to justify? Palantir Technologies. Palantir's 3 most prominent figures had each publicly advocated for military confrontation with Iran before it happened. CEO Alex Karp, in an August 2024 interview, said the United States would very likely face a 3-front war against Russia, China, and Iran simultaneously, and argued that autonomous weapon systems, the kind Palantir builds, would be decisive. Co-founder Joe Lonsdale went further, urging preemptive strikes on Iranian nuclear infrastructure and expressing excitement about investing in Iran after what he called anticipated regime change. Co-founder Peter Thiel framed Iranian nuclear acquisition as a catastrophe requiring preventive action. The company that built the analytical tool used to assess Iran's nuclear threat also provides military AI targeting for the strikes that followed. Palantir signed a strategic partnership with the Israeli Defense Ministry in January 2024, committing to provide technology for war-related missions. By the first week of March 2026, Palantir's valuation had exceeded $300 billion. A single week of war added 7% to that figure. Alex Karp did not publish a statement expressing concern. The stock chart said everything. What time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments, because this story is happening in real time, and I want to know how many time zones are watching. Name number 5. ExxonMobil and Chevron, and the reason your gas prices went up the same week bombs started falling. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow channel at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, 33 miles across at its narrowest point. Through that channel flows approximately 20% of the world's total oil supply. When the United States and Israel began striking Iran on February 28, 2026, shipping traffic through the Strait of Hormuz came to a virtual standstill. The result was instantaneous and brutal. Brent crude, the global oil benchmark, rose more than 10% in under a week. Natural gas prices in Europe doubled. American gasoline prices rose 27 cents per gallon in the same window. For ordinary Americans already stretched by inflation, this was not a Wall Street number. It was a price they paid at the pump on a Tuesday morning. For ExxonMobil and Chevron, however, it was a windfall. Both companies were producing oil that was now worth significantly more than it had been the week before. Smaller cap energy companies saw immediate stock surges. Venture Global and Cheniere Energy, both heavily involved in American liquefied natural gas exports, saw notable gains as European buyers desperately sought alternatives to Persian Gulf supply. Analysts at Energiflux calculated that exporters and traders of American liquefied natural gas were set to earn nearly $1 billion more per week based on the higher prices the conflict had generated. Abhi Rajendran, who leads oil market research at Energy Intelligence, stated it plainly. If you are operating, if you're producing, and you're going to enjoy higher prices for your product, you are going to benefit. This is the oldest calculation in the modern history of Middle Eastern conflict. Not a conspiracy. A structure. War in the Persian Gulf moves oil prices. Higher oil prices increase revenue for companies that sell oil. American oil companies sell oil. The mathematics is not hidden. It is the architecture of the global energy economy, and it has been functioning this way since the 1970s. Name number 6. SpectreWorks and General Atomics Aeronautical. The names you've almost certainly never heard, which is exactly how they prefer it. When U.S. Central Command released its list of weapon systems deployed in Operation Epic Fury, buried in the middle of the list were two entries that most news anchors glossed over in favor of the more cinematic names. The first was the MQ-9 Reaper drone, manufactured by General Atomics Aeronautical out of San Diego, California. The second was the Lucas, the low-cost uncrewed combat attack system, a one-way attack drone manufactured by an Arizona-based company called SpectreWorks. One-way attack drones are exactly what they sound like. They fly to their target and they do not come back. They are, in the language of modern warfare, expendable, which means they require constant replacement, which means constant revenue. General Atomics Aeronautical is a private company, meaning its exact financial figures are not publicly disclosed in the way Lockheed's quarterly earnings are. But the MQ-9 Reaper, which has been the backbone of American drone warfare for over a decade in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and now Iran, costs approximately $32 million per aircraft. When Reapers are destroyed in combat, they are replaced. When one-way Lucas drones strike a target, they are by definition used up. Every strike order is simultaneously a procurement order. In a sustained air campaign with no clear end date, the pipeline from production floor to combat theater is running around the clock. SpectreWorks and General Atomics do not hold press conferences. They do not post patriotic social media content. They simply invoice the Department of Defense, and the Department of Defense writes the check, and American taxpayers fund the account. Name number 7. The members of Congress who voted for this war while holding stock in the companies fighting it. On the surface, this is a story about financial disclosure forms required by the Stock Act, the law that mandates members of Congress report their stock trades within 45 days of making them. In practice, it is a story about something that sounds fictional until you see the actual numbers. Senator Ashley Brooke Moody purchased shares of Howmet Aerospace, a critical supplier of engine components and structural forgings used across military aircraft and missiles, twice in early 2025. The first purchase, made in January 2025, appreciated by more than 107% by early March 2026. The second, purchased in April 2025, was up more than 133%. These were not small sums. Both transactions were valued in the range of tens of thousands of dollars, and both preceded the explosion in demand for aerospace parts that a sustained air campaign over Iran would produce. Representative Michael McCall, who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee, made significant purchases in GE Aerospace in January 2025, positions that had gained 82% by the time the war began. He also purchased Woodward Incorporated, a maker of precision actuation systems used in military aircraft, in March of 2025. That position rose 114%. Michael McCall's committee role provides him with access to classified briefings on Iran and regional security. His purchases occurred during a period of rising U.S. military commitments and escalating proxy confrontations involving Iranian-backed forces. Senator Markwayne Mullin purchased shares of L3Harris Technologies, a major provider of electronic warfare and missile defense systems deployed in the Iran conflict, on February 13, 2025. By early March 2026, that position had returned 82%. Dozens more trades exist in the disclosure records. Representatives Gilbert Cisneros, Bruce Westerman, Joshua Gottheimer, and Lisa McLean each capturing gains of 38 to 53% on positions in Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, RTX, and related companies. Across all disclosed transactions from 2025, purchases of defense company stocks by members of Congress heavily outnumbered sales, and the majority of those purchases delivered average appreciation of 50 to 100% or more by early March 2026, exactly when the bombs began to fall. No public evidence has surfaced proving any of these trades relied on non-public information about war planning. The trades are legal. The disclosures are public. The profits are real. The people who authorized the spending also held the stocks that rose when the spending happened. That is the structure. That is name number 7. Tell me in the comments right now, Do you think this should be legal? I'll read every answer. Now step back and look at all 7 names at once, because the total picture is not 7 separate stories. It is one story told 7 times. In 2024, the top 100 defense companies in the world combined for more than $679 billion in revenue. The United States alone has 5 companies in the top tier, with Lockheed Martin at $68.4 billion, RTX at $43.6 billion, Northrop Grumman at $37.9 billion, General Dynamics at $33.6 billion, and Boeing at $30.6 billion. Together, these 5 companies represent a combined defense revenue that dwarfs the GDP of most nations on Earth. Between 2020 and 2025, the top military contractors spent $110 billion on stock buybacks and dividends. Not on factories. Not on production lines. Not on the stockpiles that the Iran war would start burning through in the first 100 hours. On returning money to their wealthiest shareholders, who are, disproportionately, the top 1% of American earners. Market analyst Jonathan Siegman of Stifel wrote to clients the morning after the Iran strikes began, defense spending was already set to surge in 2026 and a protracted war with Iran will make the spending more urgent and less controversial. He told his clients to position accordingly. Morgan Stanley issued an advisory recommending investors consider increasing exposure around themes like defense, security, aerospace, and industrial resilience, where government spending can drive multi-year demand. These are not conspiracy theories. They are analyst advisories published to paying clients by some of the most prominent financial institutions in the world. War is, in the explicit language of professional investors, good for business. There is a Wall Street Defense ETF, a fund that tracks the global defense sector, whose literal stock ticker symbol is the word war. A Marine general named Smedley Butler wrote in 1935, in a pamphlet that has never been more relevant than it is today, war is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. Butler had won 2 Congressional Medals of Honor. He had spent 33 years in the Marine Corps. He had, he said, spent most of that time as a high-class muscleman for big business. He was not an outsider making accusations. He was an insider confessing. What Butler described in 1935 is not a relic. It is an operating system. The companies are different, the weapons are different, the surveillance is digital and the drones are autonomous, but the structure is identical. A conflict begins. Weapons are consumed. Contracts are issued. Stocks rise. Dividends are paid. The men who sit on the committees that authorize the spending hold the stocks that rise when the spending happens. The people who built the AI system used to justify the intelligence case are now providing real-time targeting for the strikes that follow. And in the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the world's oil backs up behind a narrow channel while the companies that sell American oil to a frightened global market watch their revenue swell. The war cost $3.7 billion in its first 100 hours. The U.S. stockpile of precision-guided missiles was reportedly burning through reserves at a rate that defense industry lobbyists described as a crisis within 6 days of the opening strikes. The White House announced plans to ask Congress for an additional $50 billion in military funding almost immediately. The same companies that had spent a decade returning money to shareholders instead of investing in manufacturing capacity were called to the White House to discuss how quickly they could ramp up production. Their CEOs attended that meeting. Their stocks were already up. The greatest threat to investors in defense companies, as one financial analyst bluntly noted to clients in the first week of March 2026, is peace. When peace talks begin, defense investors sell. Not metaphorically. Literally. The data shows it. When Russia and Ukraine moved toward peace negotiations in late 2025, defense stocks dipped as investors anticipated reduced spending. Peace is a sell signal. War is a buy signal. That is not an editorial. It is a description of how the money moves, documented in real-time market data, available to anyone willing to look. So the next time you see a news segment about the Iran war that focuses entirely on military strategy, on Iranian capabilities, on what the generals are saying, ask yourself the question this video asked at the beginning. Who profits? And now you know 7 names. Lockheed Martin, which quadrupled THAAD production weeks before the war and whose stock rose 40% in 2026 alone before the first bomb fell. RTX, which returned $57 billion to investors over a decade while the stockpiles it was supposed to keep full ran dry in less than a week. Northrop Grumman, whose B-2 bombers crossed Iranian airspace at midnight and whose stock gained 6% before breakfast. Palantir, whose AI platform reportedly helped build the intelligence case for the war and whose CEO predicted it, whose co-founder said he was looking forward to investing in Iran after regime change, and whose valuation crossed $300 billion on the back of it. ExxonMobil and Chevron, whose product became worth 10% more the moment the Strait of Hormuz went silent, while you paid 27 more cents for every gallon of gas on your way to work. SpectreWorks and General Atomics, the quiet drone makers, whose one-way weapons require constant replacement by design and who invoice the Pentagon every time a Lucas hits a target. and the members of Congress who hold the committee seats that authorize the war spending and hold the stock positions that rise when the spending is announced. These are not 7 separate scandals. This is one system, and it has been running, with different names in different eras, since before most of us were born. General Butler called it a racket in 1935. The ticker symbol calls it war in 2026. The only thing that has changed is the altitude of the B2 and the speed of the stock alert on your phone. If you watched this entire video, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe if you haven't already. And leave a comment below with a single name from this list that surprised you the most. Because the most important thing about these 7 names is not that they exist. It is that now you know them.